Greetings, one and all. Thanks for your patience. The miracle of live broadcasting sometimes throws a curveball. We're back and we're fine. Best of all, we've got a fantastic guest now on the Lembit Öpik show. It's Howard Cox, a man who'd like to be the Mayor of London. Good day to you, Howard. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Lembit. It's a pleasure to be with you, my friend.
It's great to see you. And may I first start by congratulating you on being probably the most bolshy candidate I've ever seen for Mayor of London. Let's start with this obvious question to me. You've been running a group called Fair Fuel UK for many years and very successfully. Indeed, you're attributed as being the most successful lobbyist in the United Kingdom. And don't be modest. For what reason are you given that accolade?
Well, it's you see, I'm not a politician like you were, Lembit, and I follow in your illustrious steps. No, the thing, what's happened is that in 2010, I was doing some consultancy work, marketing consultant, communication work for small businesses, and I was working for a haulage company that had about 50 trucks. And I was one day having a cup of tea with the MD of the company, and I noticed he had a spreadsheet and showing the cost of fuel for his company, and it's something like 42% of his costs. And bear in mind, he had 50 trucks. 42% of his cost was fuel, and of which 70% was going to the government in tax. So not only was he paying corporation tax, national insurance, income tax, you name it, council tax, you name it, the whole thing. He was paying 70% of what he was filling into his trucks to the government, and that obviously was passed on to customers, us, people like us. So inflation was high, all those sorts of things. I said, well, why don't we set up a campaign with it? And so I brought together the Road Haulage Association, the Freight Transport Association, which has been renamed Logistics UK, together. And for something like 12 years with them, they backed me to fight a campaign. And we managed to freeze fuel duty in that time. In fact, it's frozen still till now. And in fact, we've had a 6p cut in fuel duty. Fuel and diesel would have been about 40 to 50% more filling up everyone's car. Listening to this channel will realise that they would have to be paying 40 to 50% more to fill up their fuel tanks if it wasn't for this campaign. So I'm quite proud to do that, and I have got a lot of respect from both the media and above all the politicians. You
must have saved the British drivers and road haulage people billions of pounds across the years, maybe even hundreds of billions of pounds. Well, when Gordon Brown was in, and David Cameron won in 2010. You mentioned David Cameron earlier. I know him quite well, but Gordon Brown was in there. He was going to introduce a fuel price escalator that every single year pump prices will go up by about 3%, basically inflation plus a penny or something like that. And if you work that out over if it had carried on, and to be fair, the Tories were not going to remove that particular escalator. They were going to go ahead with it if it wasn't for our campaigning. But if that escalator remained in place, pump prices would have been 40 to 50% more now. And imagine what that would have done to our already beleaguered economy. Inflation would be rocketing, and everything to do with inflation, almost probably half of the inflationary effect is usually down to transport costs and fuel costs. And so, yes, we estimate about £200 billion has been saved in terms of planned tax rises. So, yeah, very proud of that. You must be rich. That's when a lot of people think that. It's down to the fact I managed to get 1.7 million supporters on board, and they're the ones that should be taking the accolades, really, because they're the ones that lobbied their MPs on a regular basis. And we have something like 2,500 Fairfield UK supporters in every constituency. So it's amazing now we're coming up into general election year, the number of MPs contacting me and saying how wonderfully they are supportive of motorists because they have marginal seats of less than 2,500. Well, if you're not rich, you should be, but maybe that is why you're motivated to stand for the Mayor of London. What's behind that? It's quite a career change, isn't it, Howard?
Well, career at my age, I'm 70 this year, Lembit. So I should be, as someone said to me in the media yesterday, I should be actually, mowing the lawns and doing, tending my hot plants. No, what's happened is that I met Richard Tice, who's head of the Reform UK party, and a certain person that people will probably have heard of called Nigel Farage. I've known Nigel for 8 years because he was one of the first of the parties in UKIP in 2015 that put into their manifesto election, they would cut fuel duty by 20p. And of course I'm going to back that. That's the massive. At the time, all we heard from the Tories was something along the lines, yes, we'll try and keep it frozen, but nothing more. Anyway, Richard Tice called me and said, how would you like to stand for our London mayor? And I said, what? Why me? And he said, well, you made the point about being one of the most successful lobbyists. Even the Guardian admits that. And
that's just to explain for international viewers. The Guardian is a left-leaning newspaper that doesn't tend to be very sympathetic to people like Howard.
or motorists. They believe motorists and should be off the road, and it should be populated by cyclists. What we're seeing at the moment, Richard said, look, we'd love you to do it. It took me 3 months to say yes. I sat down with my wife and said, should I be doing this or not? And I was worried about Fairfield UK being impacted on it, and it hasn't. If anything, it's grown even more in terms of number of supporters because of this, because the politics in the UK, the climate of politics, and sorry to use that word climate, the climate of politics in this country is actually so volatile and aimlessly being pursued by a government that's lost its way. And I voted Conservative for 50 years. And for me to move from the Conservatives to Reform UK, which, the Conservatives are just simply Tory in name only, not Tory in act deeds. And Reform UK fit, in my opinion, my Thatcherite leaning. So, yes, that's the way we're going with it. And I've decided to stand. And what the biggest reason, of course, is that ULEZ, the ultra low emission zone in London, has been expanded to cover 9 million people in Greater London, right round to the orbital motorway called the M25, and for no reason at all. It's supposedly, according to the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, it is to save lives, save children, all that sort of thing. Well, he's very economical with the truth, and he manipulates data and scientific evidence to suit his green agenda. There will be no demonstrable difference to the air quality we breathe, but what will happen, it'll hit people in the pocket hard, particularly small businesses. And I'm the only candidate has proven that using some very senior independent economic analysis, that the GDP of London, the economy of London, is reducing £1 billion a year because of ULEZ. Go figure, Lembit.
This ultra low emission zone, as far as I can see, doesn't save lives at all. It looks to me like what we would call a virtue signalling act by Sadiq Khan, the Labour Mayor of London. And what I'm wondering is why Sadiq Khan gets away with claiming this is going to save thousands of lives, or at least implying it, when there doesn't seem to be a scrap of scientific evidence. And indeed, the educational institution that he used to prove it contradicted itself, because one of the other departments said there was even a negligible reduction in emissions.
Absolutely right, Lembit. And the point is, and this is the reason why I'm standing, is because normally my instincts would be I'd support the Tory candidate, but I can't. That Tory candidate is in opposition for 8 years nearly, and has done nothing to prevent the mass carnage. Sorry, I'm using that word. The Sadiq carnage that we've seen. And it's very, very sad that she is standing. A woman called Susan Hall, I've got a lot of respect for, but I'm afraid she's more like a parish councillor and she's been in opposition. Good rhetoric, but no actions. And one of the things that could have happened, the Tories could have done in opposition, is use the law courts. He has been proven to manipulate public consultation agreements, regarding the ULEZ expansion. He's manipulated data, and he's also asked. You mentioned it's Imperial College, the academics there, to change the results of their studies to show that it does in fact help improve the air quality we breathe. But they were telling no, it doesn't. And even his own TfL have shown it wouldn't make any difference. Go on. No, I was going to say
what I was going to say. I will talk over you because you just reminded me of something. I saw a leak which implied that Khan's people had contacted the education establishment they'd commissioned to do the research to tell them to modify their results or their commentary to say that ULEZ was working. Is that right?
It is absolutely right. It was his deputy mayor, Shirley Rodriguez, who actually contacted them, and it was obviously under the mayor's instruction. What Imperial College came back and said, there was no change, no impact whatsoever regarding ULEZ on the air we breathe, the quality of the air we breathe, and it didn't fit in with their agenda, as you called it, the virtual signalling agenda. Because they obviously, one of the things people have also got to understand is London is in massive debt. It's huge debt. It's a massive black hole of debt into the double-digit billions. I see figures from 12 to 18 billion of a black hole of debt. And therefore, he's the only way he feels he can actually raise money, because the government are not helping him too much either, central government. And why should they? He is to actually hit the motorists. It's an easy cash cow target. But the Tories shouldn't sit back and think they're good at this, because they've been hitting the motorists for years and years and years. We're still the highest tax drivers in the world.
Well, how did we get here? Because, as I recall, Sadiq Khan had to do a consultation before he expanded this ultra-low emission zone, and the majority of respondents said they didn't want it, but he carried on regardless. What was the point of the consultation?
Well, exactly. I mean, we do find this in a lot of areas, particularly in local authorities across the country. Public consultations, and then they come out against what the council want to do. In this case, Sadiq Khan's London Assembly. What happened there in the public consultation? 2 out of 3 said no. And one of the things that, again, as I say, the opposition Conservative candidate standing for London Mayor could have taken him to court, because he manipulated that public consultation. 5,000 of my supporters of Fairfield UK took part in that public consultation agreement in London, and they all said they didn't want to extend the ULEZ expansion. And he actually counted that 5,000 as one vote. And
one vote?
Yes, just as one. And yet a similar group, a cycling group, who actually was in support of the expansion, were counted. I think there was 4,000 in that group, and that was counted as 4,000 votes. Now,
but he still lost the consult. But he still had a majority against it, despite all of that.
Despite all. You're absolutely right, Lembit, and that's the point. And what's so sad about it is no one is challenging him on that in the courts. I mean, if I'd been, I've tried to challenge him. I've actually written letters, and I've tried to get people, and I've got a load of support to do that. But as you know, fighting the courts is expensive. And getting money to do that sort of thing, we're looking into hundreds of thousands of pounds to fight that sort of thing. But the Conservative opposition, who are sitting there opposite him, asking questions in his mayoral question time, all very great words, you're terrible, you shouldn't be doing this. They do nothing in terms of action. And that's why I'm standing. Although
for those people who don't live in London, it might not have a direct impact, it seems to me like a salutary lesson on how this country is misgoverned. And let's remember, the Labour Party want to be the government. Well, if Sadiq Khan's doing this now, is it too much of a stretch to fear what Keir Starmer might do if he became Prime Minister?
It's an interesting person, Sir Keir Starmer. I have a sort of an admiration for him in many respects, and that may come as a surprise to a lot of people. But I've spoken to him a couple of times in Portcullis House, which is it's the annex to Westminster, the House of Commons, where MPs have offices. And I've bumped into him many times. I've said to him, how can you allow the Mayor of London to bring the proud Labour Party, traditional Labour Party, down with lies and manipulations of things like public consultations agreements, manipulations of data, issues, even the Advertising Standards Authority criticised him for actually publishing something in an advert to say NOx, nitrogen dioxide and particulates have fallen, all those sorts of things. And he said to me, this is our next Prime Minister, almost 99% a shoo-in at the moment, has told me, oh, well, he's good for me and my votes in London. Well, I'm sorry, he's going to be for a real shock, because certainly he may be useful in certain areas where there's a lot of ethnicity combinations, and I respect that's not a problem. But in terms of the shires of London, leading out to the M25, the Bromleys and Croydons and places like those sorts of places will not be voting for Sadiq Khan. And you're right to actually the portents of Labour authorities across the country. You'll find most of the clean air zones and the charging of motorists are under Labour authorities.
I'll come to the wider political situation when it comes to transport in a short while. But I want to ask you this question. I was speaking to Conservatives during the week, and they say that because you tend to be regarded as a right-leaning candidate, you're splitting the vote. You're making it less likely that you or the Conservative will win, and more likely that Sadiq Khan will win because you're splitting the opposition. How do you respond to that?
Well, it takes two to split, and those two splits are myself and Susan Hall, the Conservatives. And I welcome her dropping out to let me have a clear run at this. I've got no problem with that whatsoever, and I'm happy to give her a job. In the assembly that I'll be running. No, you're right to ask that question, but we can't go on any further because we can't keep running around this Tweedledee, Tweedledum form of politics. Either red or blue is on the rosette. It's time for real change. And if you believe in the issues, and when I've been presenting all around London at various things, various presentations, etc., and I get that same question. I'm splitting the anti-calm vote. I simply say, okay, forget about who I am. Let's look at the issues. And I tell them what I'm standing for. I'm going to get rid of all ULEZ, all low traffic neighbourhoods, all 20-mile-an-hour zones, all speed bumps, all of the truck size cycle lanes, etc., all those floating bus points. And I noticed Susan Hall's come out with saying she's getting rid of that today. Well, it's funny how she's copying most of my policies now because they're populist. I'm also going to triple the number of bobbies on the beat. I'm going to make a much more affordable housing on TfL land, etc. There's loads of things I'm doing that are positive. When I say that to these people, they say, oh, I didn't realise that. Oh, I think I'll vote for you. So forget the labels, look at the issues and what's going to be achieved. Because at the moment, London, and I mentioned earlier, is £1 billion is being lost in terms of the economy every year due to ULEZ. And London is getting into more and more debt. And we need to get it motoring.
Well, after the break, I want to ask you about the relationship between transport policy and environmental policy, another impenetrable act of illogical virtue signalling as far as I can see. If you've got views, go to our website. If you've got questions, if you've got time, I'll put them to Howard Cox. You're listening to the Lembit Öpik Show here on TNT. Welcome back to the Lembit Öpik Show. I'm with Howard Cox, the man who would be the Mayor of London for Reform UK, a right-leaning movement which has, it seems to me, been doing quite well in the polls. In fact, they've gone to third place in at least one poll, ahead of my old party, the Liberal Democrats, who seem to be floundering a little bit. Howard, thanks for still being on the show. We've just been listening there to an analysis of human-caused climate change. I'm on record repeatedly as saying, I don't believe it. I'm sure that human beings make a difference to the climate, but I don't believe it's measurable. Where do you stand on this?
Well, it's very simple, Lembit. I think I've spoken to you many times on this before. We're very similar. We're similar wavelength. We need to actually make sure we do try and use cleaner fuels. I'm all for that technology. I've got no problem with cleaner fuels technology and to lower our emissions and most importantly, reduce our pollution. But I'm talking about pollution like plastics in the sea and things like that. What we, here in the UK, we're responsible for about 1% of the emissions worldwide. And yet we're going to be impoverished by a net zero target by this government, and in fact all the two major governments are actually wedded to this policy, and we're going to be impoverished by that. People something like in the region of £3,000 per household per year will impact on us as we move closer to net zero, and that's coming not from me but from the CEBR. And all I'm saying is that yes, we all share the same dream of breathing clean air, but considering where I'm standing for London Mayor, it is in the top 10 cleanest cities in the world. Why do we need to keep hitting people in the pocket? And that's what I get fed up with, and most people get fed up. The knee-jerk reaction is to actually do anything regarding the climate change that's allegedly happened and caused by human beings, is to hit people in the pocket. Let's rely on technology and working together to actually improve these things. And I'm afraid I still believe in things like we should frack, we should be self-sufficient in terms of actually our energy supply in the UK, because at the moment all we're doing is importing energy, which is from nations that actually do not follow our so-called net zero targets. We import oil all the way and gas from the States in tankers that are powered by diesel engines. You couldn't write it, could you? Invent it.
But the thing that strikes me as quite peculiar here is this. We keep being told there's a climate emergency. And yet, when these people demonstrate, people like Emma Thompson, they're perfectly happy to fly across the world in an aeroplane to join a demonstration. Sadiq Khan was perfectly happy to take a whole team to the United States in an aeroplane, but we're told not to fly. It seems obvious to me that not only is there hypocrisy here, but there's total ignorance of the basic science. Because human beings, I'm going to have a little bit of a rant here, Howard. Human beings generate maybe 3.5% of what you might call the carbon dioxide budget. Nature produces the rest, over 96.5%. If human beings produced no carbon dioxide at all, I estimate, and I've talked to experts on this, that there would be 1 atom per million in the atmosphere less every 8 years. That's it.
Yeah.
Why do they get away with this rubbish?
Well, it's a fashion, isn't it? It's a trend. There's all sorts of things goes on. The celebrity side of things, they jump on bandwagons, and I've been on many media channels in the last 2 or 3 years up against people who say we've got a climate change crisis. I'm even accused by certain people that I'm actually killing children because I support diesel and petrol cars and things like that. And it's very sad. And I just don't understand where they're coming from. And I always ask this question to them. Okay, show us the data. Show us the real empirical data. And they can't do it. I'm a scientist by training, and my background is biochemistry and pharmacology. Many moons ago, because I'm in my 70th year now. But, when I did that, I couldn't publish any papers or do anything like that without empirical, peer-reviewed evidence. And it seems that these people, and backed by billionaires, there's the World Economic Fund, even WHO, the UN, are saying we've got this incredible existential threat through our lives. I'm sorry, I don't believe in any of that at the moment until I see the facts. And I'm telling you that CO2 is a good thing. And I'd like to see it double from 0.04% to 0.08% and then you watch Africa flourish.
Tell me more about how you interact with government as a lobbyist.
Well, it did in the first year in 2010, 2011, we managed to get on board with one of the most brilliant MPs. And I just think he's the most amazing man possible. That's Robert Halfon, MP for Harlow in Essex in the UK. And he saw the merits of what's happening in terms of actually how motorists are being used as cash cows. And he also saw them as votes as well, because if you got on the side of the motorists, there's 37 million of them in the UK. I also got on board with 70 other MPs that time, simply by presenting the case. We had some very good objective evidence, economic evidence, why cutting fuel duty is good for the economy, good for investment, good for inflation, good for all those sorts of things. And they suddenly realised it. And the true Tories at that time said, no doubt, yeah, we're back that. And that's how I got it. And also, most important thing, of course, as I said earlier, I've got support out there in the constituencies from grassroots people, drivers who need their vehicles, sole traders who need their vans, etc., to contact their MP. And in many cases, MPs got something like 2,000 to 3,000 emails in the space of 48 hours saying, please support Fairfield UK. And that's how I did it lobbying. And I did it without attacking or being rude or blocking, gluing myself to the roads or anything like that. We did it by honest, empirical, evidence-based campaigning. And I got a lot of respect. Plus, that rebounded into the media itself, a lot of the national newspapers, not the BBC, I'm afraid, because the BBC still hates the driver. And from that point of view, I got a lot of support of backbench MPs. Many of them now are in the cabinet, and I'm very close to people. Like I was invited, I didn't solicit this interview, but with the Minister for Energy this week, the Minister of Net Zero too. So we had an interesting discussion about that. It's Claire Coutinho. And she's been saying some nice things about me in social media. She said, you've been incredible what you've done. I'm also close to the leader of the House, Penny Mordaunt. She's also a big fan. And I understand that this is, an exclusive to you guys here on TNT, that the Prime Minister has asked various people to get me back into the Conservative fold. But,
are you allowed to tell us this? Are you allowed to tell us this?
No. So, don't tell anyone listening, please. No, it's not a problem. It's no secret that that's come out from other areas as well. And, I've been contacted by the media about that particular point. I'm afraid I'm not going back to the Tories until they become a Conservative party again. And you alluded to the fact that Reform UK is a right-wing party. I hate these labels left and right. I believe it's common sense and what popular policies that Reform UK is standing on. Little things like, increasing tax levels in terms of when you first start paying tax from 12,500 to 20,000 makes sense to me in terms of actually putting more money in the pocket. That's what I'm trying to do in terms of reducing fuel duty, putting more money in people's pockets for consumer spending, which gets the economy motoring and puts more growth taxes into the exchequer as a result.
I don't know if you're willing to share this, but I once heard you tell a story about some sneaky business which made it seem like your house was a petrol station. Can you share that?
Well, because obviously, I think it would not take any one with any sort of a level of intelligence to recognise that I'm not popular with the Greens, I'm not popular with environmentalists, and I'm not popular with the cyclists. I still get threats from them, and I've had death threats. I've had all sorts of things. I've had dog feces wrapped up in cycle gloves put through the letterbox, all that sort of thing. But also, some clever wag decided to, on Google Maps, to actually designate my home house as a petrol station. And I did get thousands and thousands of calls. In fact, there was a time when petrol supply and diesel supply was bad, and that's when they did it in the fuel supply chain. And I got phone calls. Oh, have you got any diesel? I got phone calls at 12 o'clock at night, this sort of thing. And, it's sad that, again, you made the point about the climate change, and I always ask for the evidence. These people only work on emotion and abuse and insults. They do not work on actually empirical data where we could all debate. I'm willing to be convinced, but I'm not convinced with what I've seen so far.
Looking ahead, what are your prospects, honestly, in the mayoral election?
It's an Everest to climb. There's no doubt about it. But I'm not going away. I've been asked to drop out, and by certain Tory grandees, and I've been offered certain things. And sorry, I don't respond to bribes. I'm going all the way, and if Sadiq Khan gets in because I'm standing and Susan Hall's standing, we can't touch him. I'm afraid that's you're voting. You choose to what you vote. Democracy is about issues. It shouldn't be about actually tactical voting. And I'm going to go all the way. So watch this space, Lembit. I think things will change. I think the approach, I'm moving up in the polls slowly but steadily. And as one of your colleagues said when I was on TNT earlier this week, he said, yes, Howard, it's good to be on the board, but Everest was climbed. All you need is a few Sherpas and an oxygen tank, and you could win this. And he was very kind and supportive in that manner.
Nigel Farage was in a reality television show, which is filmed in Australia, near Brisbane. I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Rumour has it that he's thinking of coming back into frontline politics. He's a broadcaster now. Can you tell us what he's planning to do?
I had lunch with him last week, and we had a good couple of hours chewing the cud of what he's doing, what I'm doing. He gave me some sage-like advice of what I'm doing, because he is probably one of the most influential politicians of the last 20 years. And he went into the jungle. Yes, everyone's talking about how much money he got, but fundamentally, his popularity has risen incredibly as a result, because he's a decent, honest guy. I mean, I come back to the point. The people that are against him are scared of him. And to answer your question, what's he going to do? I have got an idea what he's going to do, but as he said to me beautifully, he said, timing, dear boy, timing. And that's what it's about. We don't know when the general election is actually going to be. We assume in autumn of this year. I've got a mayoral one to run, and I'm hoping he's going to be helping me with that. And he tells me he is. But Nigel will be having an influence on what happens to our future of the politics in this country. I promise you that.
Did he make a good, this is a general question really about politicians. Did he make a good decision to go into a celebrity television show, or was it damaging to his brand?
When I first heard it, I thought, oh dear. But then I watched him and how he did it. And I've never watched Celebrity. The last time I watched it was when you were in it, Lembit. And
13 years ago, 14 years ago now.
Was it 14 years? Well, crikey. Oh, I had started shaving then. Anyway, Nigel explained it to me before he went in. And then when I saw him last week, he looks trim, by the way. He's got, he's lost a lot of weight because of it. But yeah, I think it's improved his brand, especially within people that didn't know anything about him. And I think that's the important thing. And he's loving his broadcasting on another channel, and he's very good at it. But he's not letting go of things. Look at all he did with the banking scandal, the ones where you were cancelled if you had some political leaning or something. Certain banks cancelled you, and he thought that, and he made massive difference to what happened on that recently. And he's looking at other things. He's having a go at the moment of your old. Well, he's not your old boss. I mean, the current your old party's boss, Ed Davey, regarding the post office scandal we've got over here. He's always going to be around.
Ed Davey, the man who was in charge of the post office and refused to meet Mr. Bates who's probably the leading campaigner. Ed Davey could have owned this. Instead, he hid from Parliament on Wednesday, it seems to me, by not showing up for PMQs.
And he's not man enough to simply say, look, sorry, I got this wrong. What can I do now? And I tell you what, that would come across so well, but I'm afraid he's really hit the Lib Dems potential chances of getting any MPs really badly. And I think Reform UK will take over from them. And
are you enjoying your campaigning?
It's an interesting time. It's very hard work for an old git like me. Sorry, is that a swear?
You can say that. Git's acceptable.
For an old git
not accurate,
like me,
but it's acceptable.
But yeah, I'm working 12 to 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. But because I'm still running Fairfield UK, and we've got a budget only in 6 weeks' time on March the 2nd, where the Chancellor's going to stand up and tell us, and probably give loads of giveaways and everything in general election year. I'm trying to get a significant cut in fuel duty. I've got a lot of support, particularly from people like MPs like Jonathan Gullis, who's another one of these people. He's a Red Wall seat MP from Stoke-on-Trent. And he's actually doing something I'm doing with the Sun, myself, Fairfield UK and him. We're putting together and we're going to call for a significant cut in fuel duty. So I'm doing that, and I'm also campaigning for Mayor of London. So I'm busy beyond belief, Lembit.
Sounds like you're enjoying it. I have to tell you, wild horses wouldn't drag me to stand right now again, rather you than me. I'm happy to pay my taxes so that you can be a good mayor. And you said you get rid of the whole of the ultra-low emission zone and the congestion charge?
Well, it's an interesting one. The congestion charge is on my target radar to get rid of, but I need to look at the finances of what's going on in London. The ULEZ is actually, I think, contrary to what some of the figures coming out, is breaking even in terms of what comes in and what it costs. Study Khan is spending £150 million on security against you.
Howard, thank you so much. Going to cut you off there. Really enjoyed the time with you. We'll have you back again. If you've got questions or comments, then feel free to put them into our chat. Coming up next, we've got a live wire, a stone in the shoe of the establishment. All of that with me on the Lembit Öpik Show right here on TNT.